All right, let's dive right into this explainer of Jan Mauro's absolutely captivating book, 3 Stars. Today we're unpacking the century-long battle for the very soul of Argentine football. You know, it's a story of incredible passion, absolute heartbreak, and ultimately one of the most satisfying resolutions in the entire history of sports. If you've ever thought football is just a game, well, the history of this national team is going to completely change your mind.
Millions in the streets, helicopters literally having to rescue players from the crowds. December 18th, 2022. When Argentina won the World Cup in Qatar, it wasn't just your typical sports parade, right? As Mauro explains it, it was this visceral, explosive release of 100 years of national pressure and heartbreak. We're talking about a country coming apart at the seams with pure joy. But why was the emotion so incredibly intense? Section 1. The 100-Year Argument, a Philosophical Battle.
To understand that historic catharsis, we have to look at their history through this specific lens. It's basically a giant tug of war. On one side, we have the genius, the romance of the individual artist, that beautiful, free-flowing style known as la nuestra, embodied by the local street kid. But then, on the exact opposite side, we have the collective, the brutal, pragmatic need for a structured team. This is sometimes called anti-football, prioritizing steel, defense, and strict organization. The entire drama of Argentine football is essentially a pendulum swinging wildly between these two extremes.
Section 2. The Cult of Genius, the Thesis of Beauty. Let's rewind a bit to the late 1890s. This is when La Nuestra is born, Argentina's steadfast belief that football is first and foremost an art form. And the ideal for this art form? It was the pibe. Imagine a talented street player from the barrios who relies on cunning, pure improvisation, and this joyful disrespect for structure. The entire nation treated these dribbling artists like poets. But actually, it created a tragic flaw in their sporting psyche. They believed beauty alone could win. That arrogance led straight to their 1930 World Cup heartbreak against a much tougher Uruguay. And it sparked a stubborn 24-year isolation where Argentina simply refused to play in the World Cup at all, totally convinced their beautiful style was already the best in the world.
Section 3. The pragmatic backlash, the antithesis of steel.
Well, you can't hide forever. Eventually, that romanticism caught up to them in the most painful classroom imaginable, 6-1. Just let that scoreline sink in for a second. The starkness of this 1958 World Cup loss to Czechoslovakia utterly shattered the romantic illusion of Argentine supremacy literally overnight. They showed up in Europe expecting to dazzle everyone with their individual brilliance, only to find out the rest of the world had become faster, fitter, and infinitely more organized. So here is the crucial takeaway. That numeric trauma caused a violent pendulum swing towards absolute cynicism and brutality on the pitch. Enter anti-football. This was a hardcore, win-at-all-costs philosophy that just threw beauty out the window. I mean, if playing beautifully gets you beat 6-1, the country decided they would way rather play ugly, kick their opponents, and focus entirely on defensive structure just to survive.
Section 4. The false cures, the first 2 stars.
Now, in 1978 and 1986, Argentina finally conquered the world, but they did so in ways that actually masked their deeper identity crisis. In 1978, hosting the tournament, they won their first star. On the pitch, it was a genuine triumph of coach Cesar Luis Menotti's collective system, which really tried to marry skill with supreme fitness. But we have to look at the historical context. It was won while a military dictatorship committed horrific atrocities in the background, using the tournament as a massive PR tool. So a structural success for the team, for sure, but a profoundly complicated moment in their history.
Then came 1986, set against the raw geopolitical backdrop of the Falklands War. Maradona delivered what is widely considered the greatest one-man tournament ever played. He fused outright cheating with this transcendent, breathtaking genius. Or, as he famously put it, a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. He was the ultimate pibe, essentially dragging his team to a World Cup victory almost entirely through his own supernatural talent. But what's truly fascinating about this, that 1986 victory actually set a trap. It was a curse disguised as a blessing. Because Maradona won the tournament so individually, he inadvertently taught the country the wrong lesson. They learned to just abandon collective structure and wait around for the next divine savior to come along and rescue them.
Section 5. The Weight on Messi. The Burden of the 10.
This fatal dependency birthed the wilderness years, dropping an impossibly crushing weight onto the next generational talent. Just look at this suffocating string of near misses and disasters. A final loss in '90, a group stage exit in 2002, another World Cup final loss in 2014, and then agonizing back-to-back Copa America final losses in 2015 and 2016. The nation demanded that Lionel Messi be the entire team, just like Maradona was. But without a proper system to actually support him, the burden was just too heavy for one man to carry. Which leads us to this incredibly heartbreaking moment. The national team is over for me. This agonizing quote captures Messi's devastating breaking point after missing a penalty in that 2016 final. But the big takeaway here is that this shocking retirement was actually the catalyst. It was a moment of national emergency that finally forced Argentina to look in the mirror and reckon with their completely broken philosophy.
Section 6. The Perfect Synthesis. Revolution of La Scaloneta.
To escape this endless cycle of pain, the Federation turned to a totally unknown interim coach named Lionel Scaloni. And Scaloni had to ask the ultimate question. Could the genius and the collective finally align? He realized that beauty and structure had never actually been enemies. You didn't have to choose between the romantic artist and the hardened team. You desperately needed both. So he created a formula affectionately known as La Scaloneta. The rules were simple. No egos, protect the number 10, and forge an unshakable brotherhood. He built a brilliant system not to rely on the genius to do everything, but to protect him. By surrounding Messi with tireless midfielders who would just run themselves into the ground, Scaloni allowed Messi to finally be joyful and completely liberated on the pitch. And we saw this new synthesis proven at the 2021 Copa America. Deep in the Maracanã, they finally broke their mental block against their eternal rivals, Brazil. They took a narrow lead, and instead of collapsing nervously like those teams of the past, they defended it with absolute discipline. They learned how to hold on. They finally learned how to win as a true collective. Which, of course, set the stage perfectly for Qatar 2022, when disaster struck early with that massive shock opening loss to Saudi Arabia. Pretty much everyone thought the familiar Argentine collapse was happening all over again. But instead of fracturing, the Brotherhood stayed united. There was absolutely no finger pointing. This unified collective forged an intense siege mentality that fueled their incredible run all the way to the final. And what a final it was! In arguably the greatest World Cup final ever played, Argentina blew a 2-goal lead to France. They literally had to endure a Kylian Mbappe hat trick, which, by the way, is the exact kind of late-game trauma that used to completely destroy them. But this team, they relied on their newfound psychological steel and Emiliano Martinez's miraculous goalkeeping to survive the storm and win on penalties. When we look back at the 3 titles, the evolution is so clear. 1978 was the system, 1986 was the genius, but the 2022 victory? That was the synthesis. The third star was the ultimate catharsis, because it finally synthesized their 100-year argument. It proved once and for all that to conquer the world, you absolutely need both the rock-solid collective foundation and the individual spark of magic. Which leaves us looking ahead to the next chapter. As Argentina prepares to defend their title as a perfectly balanced machine, we have to wonder if this beautiful synthesis will actually endure. I mean, as we approach 2026, can the collective survive once the ultimate genius finally says goodbye? Will the system Scaloni built be strong enough to stand on its own, or will the ghosts of the 100-year argument return? It's a fascinating question, and honestly, I cannot wait to see how it all unfolds.